Good afternoon, everyone. Before we proceed with the program, I request everybody to please put their phones on silent. It's a humble request. On the behalf of the Department of National Security Studies, Central University of Jammu, I, Abhigya Lange, research scholar NSS, welcome the August gathering present here in the distinguished lecture series. Before we start with the program, I request everybody to please stand up for the national anthem.
भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उज्जल जलधि तरंगा तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे गाए तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
We have with us Ambassador G. Parthasarthi, Chancellor, Central University of Jammu, Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava, Professor and Dean Devanand Sir, Registrar Professor Yashwant Singh. A very warm welcome to all of you. I also welcome the guests, deans, HOD, faculty, administration, scholars, as well as the students present here. Before we proceed with the program, I invite all the distinguished guests sitting on the dais for the lamp lighting ceremony.
शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणं आरोग्यं धनसम्पदं शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणं आरोग्यं धनसम्पदं शत्रुबुद्धिविनाशाय दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते दीपज्योतिर्नमोस्तुते शुभं कुरुत्वं कल्याणं आरोग्यं धनसम्पदम्
Thank you. To continue with the program, I invite Dr. J. Jagannathan, Head, Department of National Security Studies, for his welcome address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable Chancellor, Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, the keynote speaker, our guest, Ambassador Dinkar T. Srivastava, Professor Devanand, the Registrar of Central University of Jammu, Professor Yashwant Singh, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I would like to welcome our chief guest, the Chancellor, Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, for gracing this occasion and chairing this special lecture, distinguished lecture. And also, I'd like to invite, welcome Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava. I will introduce him later on. Thank you very much, sir, for choosing the Central University to deliver this talk. I would like to welcome Dr. Ashok Ban, the former DGP, J&K Police. I would like to welcome Colonel Abhimanyu and the representative from Northern Command 16 Corps and Colonel GP Singh and the head of the departments and the dean of various schools and our guests from media and also the cadets from Jammu Kashmir Police Technical Training Institute and all the officers of this university, department, head of the departments and faculty of Central University of Jammu and scholars and students. Let me briefly introduce about this today's program. This program, it is Distinguished Lecture Series sponsored by Ministry of External Affairs, Government of India. In fact, in 2016, the Department of National Security Studies has started organizing this Distinguished Lecture Series sponsored by Ministry of External Affairs. And I'm very glad to share this news that Ambassador G. Parthasarathy was the first one to begin this Ambassador Lecture Series in 2016. And we had it in TAP. Later on, he became the Chancellor of our university. It is indeed a good beginning, sir, with your lecture way back in 2016. And later on, we organized almost 3 to 4 lecture series covering various topics in this university. And today, it is much more very interesting and also special in terms of this is organized under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav. The Ministry of External Affairs, particularly the Public Diplomacy Division, has been organizing 75 lectures in the past 2 years. And this is the last lecture, the 75th lecture under the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav and Amrit Kal. And at the Central University of Jammu, Department of National Security Studies, for the first time we coordinated 3 lectures in the state of Jammu and Kashmir. We had one lecture in Indian Institute of Management, Jammu, Indian Institute of Technology in Jammu, and for the first time we had a joint lecture in Central University of Kashmir. I think in the last year, month of November. So having organized that, this is the last lecture, but it is a very special lecture. Let me introduce the speaker. We have with us a distinguished person, I would say, Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava. He is a very learned diplomat and I could say the scholar. I could see the scholar. He has published a book on Forgotten Kashmir, the other side of the line of control. He's going to speak about that book. Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava, he's currently serving as a distinguished fellow at Vivekananda International Foundation. It is a New Delhi-based think tank. He was also an ambassador to Indian ambassador to Islamic Republic of Iran between 2011 and 15. During his tenure, he led negotiations on India's participation in Chabahar Port. Chabahar Port is considered as a strategically very important port. I hope all of you have recently heard the news that the Prime Minister had recently started sending the supplies to Afghanistan via Chabahar Port. And in the past, he also served as an Indian ambassador to Czech Republic, Libya, and India's High Commissioner to Malta. He joined Indian Foreign Service in 1978, and after his retirement, he served as a senior advisor to ONGC Videsh Limited, and also served as independent director on board of GAIL. He is currently board of directors of India Ports Global Limited, the company under the shipping ministry, charged with the development of Chabahar Port, which is a very, I think we could make it out that he had a distinguished career. And today we have got a very eminent. Once again, on behalf of Central University of Jammu, we welcome you, sir. It's indeed a great pleasure to have you in this afternoon and in our campus. With this view, I think it's not, we don't need an introduction of Ambassador G. Parthasarathi. He has been our guiding spirit of this university in the last 5 years as a chancellor. He has been frequently visiting us and delivering an interesting talk about the foreign policy, geopolitics, international relations, and India's policy of Pakistan. So we have been enjoying your lecture, and today, thank you very much, sir, for being with us today. With these few remarks, may I request Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava to deliver his keynote address on the Forgotten Kashmir, the other side of the line of control. Over to you, sir.
Somebody can move the slides.
Yeah, slowly, sir.
Slides will be shown.
Yes, yes. Over here.
आप मैप के लिए and this is it. Good afternoon. I'm conscious that I'm in the company of people who know the subject better than I do, and of course, my senior High Commissioner Parthasarathi. And I know that there are many people in the audience who know the ground situation very well. I want to thank Dr. Jagannathan for a very generous introduction. One small correction. I served on the board of directors of India Ports Global for 6 years. This is a company for developing Chabahar port. I'm no longer there. I finished my term, and so मैं अब आजाद हूँ. The topic today, this is a book which I wrote during pandemic years, and it's based on my experience of dealing with Kashmir issue in Jammu and Kashmir issue for 8 years in MEA, and I have also served in Pakistan. There are a number of books on the Indian side of Jammu and Kashmir. There is very little literature available on the other side, and that is a gap I have tried to fill up. Pakistan talks about Kashmir. It has appropriated Kashmir cause. It talks about it, but it does not like to talk about the part of Kashmir it has illegally occupied. And as we go along, we will know why it is so. You see the map, and of course, most of you will be aware of this, but just to sum up, the purple part in the northwest, that is the POK or POJK. Now, on the top, this is this big bulge, that is northern area, and this thin sliver of territory, this is like a paw of the lamb jutting down. This is what Pakistanis like to call Azad Jammu and Kashmir. We call it POJK. We call the whole area POJK. And this is not simply a question of difference in terminology. What it hides is that Pakistan separated northern area, which is 85% of the territory illegally occupied by Pakistan, way back when. There are two views. The current view, which is very popular amongst many international commentators, and unfortunately even some Indian commentators have imbibed it, is that this area was separated from POK in 1949 Karachi Agreement. Now, Karachi Agreement was an agreement between Pakistan government, represented by Nawab Burmani, and the leaders of POK, Sardar Ibrahim, who was the first president, and Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, who was the Muslim Conference chairman. Now, this is one version of truth. In the 90s, there was a famous American movie, it's a comedy, and the hero is shown, he's caught by his second wife flirting with his third girlfriend, and the wife accuses him of various things which he all denies. And then he delicately adds that what she was saying was a version of truth. And she retorts, truth does not have versions, there's only one truth. So this Karachi agreement is a version of truth, which is what the Pakistan has now, they claim. Now, this agreement was kept secret, not only from India and the United Nations, but even from the people of POK. It came to light 3 decades later in a famous judgment of POK High Court in 1993, where POK High Court said that separation of northern areas from POK by Pakistan was a violation of UN Security Council resolutions. Now, this was a big slap on Pakistan's face because the POK High Court itself was saying that the resolutions, UN resolutions, which Pakistan upholds, it had violated. And why was it a violation? Because the UN resolutions said that the fate of the territory will be decided by plebiscite. And Pakistan had taken away 85% of the territory without any reference to the people or without any plebiscite. Now, this is, as I said, this is a version of truth. There are 2 caveats. First one, and this is something which is available in public domain. Major Brown, he was a British officer of Gilgit Scouts, which was a militia under Maharaja, and he raised the flag of revolt and claimed Gilgit Baltistan for Pakistan on 1st November 1947. This is about 7 days after the tribal invasion had started. Now, there's no other parallel in the annals of world history where the representative of the colonial power leads the freedom struggle. So it gives away that this was no indigenous struggle. This was a gift by the departing colonial power to its favorite son, which was Pakistan. Now, he has written his memoirs, which are very aptly titled Coup d'etat, because what he did was a coup d'etat. It was no freedom struggle. And in this, he described that after taking over, he invited Pakistan government to send a representative to take over the territory. That representative was a man called Muhammad Alam, a Tehsildar of Northwest Frontier Province, who arrived on 17th November and took over this. This territory was handed over by Major Brown to Muhammad Alam. Now the issue is, this took place about a month after of 3 weeks after the declaration of provisional government of POK, which was 24th October 1947. The point is that if the so-called provisional government, which Pakistan, sort of propagated, had been formed, why wasn't this territory handed over to provisional government of POK? Why was it taken over by Northwest Frontier Province, which was part of Pakistan? So the separation of northern areas from POK was effected at the birth by Pakistan. This was almost 2 years before the so-called Karachi Agreement. Now, the second caveat I mentioned, and this was Sardar Ibrahim, who was the chief, signatory of this so-called Karachi Agreement. He was a very, interesting man. He became president of POK 4 times. So in his later life, he went on saying, मैंने जिंदगी में और भी गलतियां की हैं, ये गलती नहीं की. So he denied ever having signed the Karachi Agreement. The other signatory was Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas, the Muslim Conference chairman. He said he had signed it only as a party representative, and his job as party representative was advocacy of Kashmir cause. So secession of the territory, he was not responsible for it. So both the representatives of the POK people had distanced themselves from this so-called Karachi Agreement. So to begin with, this agreement was most probably a forgery. my book has, I think, for the first time brought this out. Now, let's move to the other part. This is the tribal invasion started around 20th October, 26th October. Kashmir state acceded to India, and Indian army was sent, and the so-called tribal invasion, the tide was stemmed. There's a very interesting book by a man called Yusuf Sarraf. He was a Muslim conference leader who's played a very major role in POK's creation. Between 15th August 47 and 26th October 47, when Kashmir acceded to India, there was a 2 months interregnum where this was, the state was in a limbo. The Muslim Conference Working Committee had passed a resolution asking for J&K to be an independent state under the Maharaja. Muslim Conference did not, the Working Committee did not support accession to Pakistan. Yusuf Sarraf got it reversed next day in the general body meeting in favor of Pakistan. So he is supposed to have played a major role for Pakistan's benefit. Now that man, 40 years later, he became the POK Supreme Judicial Council chairman. He's given the insider's account, and it's an account which exposes, various versions of truth which Pakistan has propagated. So he has described his conversation with Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of POK. Sardar Ibrahim said that he declared provisional government on the basis of 2 phone calls received from Rawalpindi. One was Khwaja Naseem, the Rawalpindi commissioner, and the second was Begum Khwaja Rahim, and the second one was Begum Naseem, the then wife of this military adventurer Colonel Akbar Khan, who was leading the so-called tribal invasion. Now, why the calls came from Rawalpindi? Karachi was the national capital. The instructions came from Rawalpindi because Rawalpindi then as now was the Pakistan Army GHQ. And Pakistan Army has played a very major role in crafting Pakistan's Kashmir policy. Now, Akbar Khan, who Pakistan said in the United Nations that it has no role in the tribal invasion, it was trying to prevent it, but its forces were dispersed, so it could not help it. Akbar Khan has given the insider's account that he was asked to plan for this invasion. In fact, he said way back, he's not given the exact date, but this is much before even the independence, a few months before the independence. So first suggestion was capture Jammu so that Indian army could not reach Kashmir Valley. Second was internal revolt, and third was tribal invasion. He said first 2 were ruled out because Pakistan army then as now was scared of Indian army. They could not engineer a revolt because the people of the valley were with Abdullah was supporting India. So the tribal invasion was decided. He said there were at least 4 meetings chaired by Liaquat Ali Khan, Pakistan's prime minister, where this decision was taken. Now, the book is titled Raiders in Kashmir. So again, it tells you what it was. It was no indigenous struggle. Now, that book has another very interesting revelation, which I believe the first time my book has brought out. Akbar Khan says that he was inside. He planned this. He led the invasion under the pseudonym of General Tariq. He said that on 27th October, he and his colleagues were listening to Pakistan radio broadcast, which mentioned that the previous day, Kashmir has acceded to India and the Indian army has been rushed in. And then he adds in the same paragraph, by that evening, the provisional government was declared. Now, what is the significance? It means that the provisional government was declared on 27th October, not 24th. Why was the date brought forward? Because Pakistan argued in the UN Security Council that Maharaja had no authority to sign the instrument of accession because in international law, the sovereignty is defined in terms of control of territory and control of armed forces. Maharaja had lost control of territory because by that time the provisional government of POK had been formed. So, to buttress this argument, this narrative has been, created in retrospect, and unfortunately, it has been imbibed by most of the international commentators and most of the Indian writings also. But this passage exists in his book, and this is not a typing error because there's a whole paragraph, and you can read it in the sequence. Now we come to the next part, and this is this war waged on in India went to the United Nations in January 48. August 48, the UNCEP resolution. UNCEP was UN Commission for India and Pakistan. UN first, the Security Council passed a couple of resolutions, and then they formed this commission. The commission came to the subcontinent. They adopted this resolution in August 48, which has three parts: ceasefire, truce obligations, and plebiscite. Plebiscite comes at the end of the process. The second part, which is the truce agreements, involves Pakistan's obligations and some obligations by India. Now, read carefully. The Pakistan's obligation says Pakistan, the government of Pakistan, the government of Pakistan agrees to withdraw its troops from that state. So not only the UN resolution said Pakistan government had conveyed its agreement. Now this has not been fulfilled to date. Now then, and if you see the chronology, this was to precede the plebiscite, which was part of third part. And there was a differentiation between Indian government commitments, obligations, and Pakistani. Pakistan was to withdraw all its forces. And in case of India, it was bulk of its forces. And this was the UN's grudging recognition that India had a local standby, as the sovereignty had vested in India with the accession, and the accession legality of accession was not denied by the Security Council. The US representative said in the Security Council debate that the legality of J&K's accession to India is beyond doubt. Now let's come to the third part, which is plebiscite. There is this very widespread impression that India promised plebiscite and went back on it. And there are people like A.G. Noorani. I have great respect for him. I know him. I've met him. But he also has a habit of his versions of truth. So his version of truth is that Nehru went back because Mrs. Gandhi said that hawa badal gayi hai, and people are no longer with Sheikh Saab. There's something 49. Plebiscite, though it has been talked about ad infinitum by Pakistan, there have been only 3 formal proposals. And on all 3 occasions, India was agreed, Pakistan went back on it. Now, the first such proposal was 2nd November 1947. This is within a week of the tribal J&K's accession to India. Mountbatten went to Lahore. He met Jinnah, and he suggested plebiscite under UN's auspices. Mountbatten conveyed that you attempt to have a preemptive strike and grab it before Indian forces moved, and that has failed. So this is your best option. Now, what he was suggesting has since then become Pakistan's official position for 7 decades. Plebiscite under UN's auspices. Jinnah refused. Now, this account is given by Alan Campbell Johnson, My Mission with Mountbatten. He was the press advisor. This doesn't come from any Indian source. And Mountbatten's reason, he gave technical reasons that, let's do it bilaterally, which is a digression from the UN's auspices. And Mountbatten said, whatever you can do, my position is different. I'm a constitutional Governor General. So, but essentially, Jinnah refused. Why did he refuse? He refused because tribal invasion was on. and the tribals had killed, looted, and raped Hindus, Muslims, Christians, Sikhs alike without discrimination. So Jinnah knew that in any vote, Pakistan will lose, so he turned it down. The second occasion, which was more interesting, this is 3 years down the line, 1950. UN appointed a mediator, Owen Dixon, and Owen Dixon came to India and Pakistan, suggested regional plebiscite because he said that a single plebiscite across the entire state would leave pockets of minorities on either side of political divide and lead to forced migration, which was already happening or had happened on a massive scale elsewhere in the subcontinent. So to avoid it, he suggested regional plebiscite, and he said he limited the scope to valley because he said in other areas, given the composition of the population, it was clear which way they'll go. The contention was about the valley because 70% of the population were Muslims, but the leading political force, National Conference, had opted for India. Pakistan should have jumped at it because their advantage in terms of numerical composition was greatest in the valley. Owen Dixon has reported in his stated in his report to the UN that India was willing to consider it. Pakistan turned it down. Pakistan turned it down, saying that the principle that regional plebiscite was a departure from the principle of single plebiscite. Now, this is an argument they were to take again, but so let me explain what is the fallacy of this, and that fallacy has come out from the same paragraph, which has been in public domain now for 75 years, but it was not noticed. I have dealt with UN for 8 years. I have brought this out. The same paragraph, next sentence, Owen Dixon reports, but I am given the impression that Pakistan was willing to accept a partition of the state provided it got the valley. So Pakistan was willing to make a departure from the principle of single plebiscite, which was simply a ruse, a pretext, because it was willing to accept a partition. There is no plebiscite involved. Now we come to the third and the decisive part, and this is 1953. Sheikh Abdullah was dismissed 8th October 53. If you go by Noorani's thesis, Nehru and India had lost the Abdullah Ka. Now, Pakistan proposed bilateral talks. Bogra, Pakistani Prime Minister, came to Delhi. Bogra-Nehru joint statement was issued, which is in public domain. Both sides agreed to plebiscite. Bogra went back on 1st December 1953. He wrote an official letter to Nehru, going back on the commitment of plebiscite he had made in Delhi in a public document. And the reason again, that regional plebiscite was a departure from the idea of single plebiscite. As I have brought out earlier, this was simply a hoax because Pakistan was willing to accept a partition provided it got the valley and got the valley without a vote. So all three occasions when a specific proposal was made, Pakistan backed out. Now, what was the reason? What we have to look into the ground situation. And again, something which I am indebted to a man called B.L. Sharma, very senior. I've never met him. Probably he was dead by the time I joined service. Mountbatten staff, he was member of the Indian delegation to the UN. He's written a book where he made a reference to this military operation, which gave me a clue. And there was nothing available on the Indian side or international literature, so I went to the UN. In 1955, Muslim Conference gave a memorandum. In 1949, Sardar Ibrahim, the first president of POK, was dismissed by Pakistan. Now that triggered what is called Sudan Revolt, which spread all over POK over a period of time, lasted for almost a decade. Yusuf Sarraf's book mentions that it was there when Ayub Khan visited the area after taking over, which was 1958. And in 1955, that is about 7 years after this revolt had broken out, and the full-fledged military operation was on. First Punjab Constabulary and then Pakistan Army. Muslim Conference gave a memorandum to Pakistan Constituent Assembly. Now, I have quoted excerpts from that memorandum, verbatim, no interpretation. And in this, they said that, for past few years, people of this area have been subjected to great torture, terrorization. Ruthless and random firing by mortar guns took place, resulting in many deaths. Mortar is a heavy caliber gun being used against the civilians, which are all Muslims in Kashmir, Kashmiris. In areas so and so, women have not only been raped, but in some cases, their breasts and secret parts have been bitten by the police and officers. Teenage boys subjected to unnatural voices, terrorized by the situation. 3,000 people have gone over to the Indian side of the ceasefire line. Now, if the situation was this bad, and this was the leading political organization of the state saying this, to whom? This is not media report to Pakistan Constituent Assembly. Now you understand why Pakistan was dragging its feet to hold plebiscite, because it could not have been sure of the outcome of the vote, even on the part of territory it had illegally occupied. Now this is the Bogra's letter of 1st December 53. It preceded Nehru's statement of April 54, in which he said plebiscite no longer is relevant because Pakistan has joined American-led military alliance and therefore the situation is different. This was flogging a dead horse, essentially, because plebiscite, the idea of plebiscite had already been killed by Pakistan. Plebiscite is a choice between two states. You can never hold it unilaterally. And one of the two, Pakistan had withdrawn, had refused it in 4 months earlier. Now you have a long interregnum, and while the Indian side there were elections, regular elections, on the Pakistani side the place was run on the basis of rules of business. These are executive orders. It was essentially run by a joint secretary in Ministry of Kashmir Affairs, which was located in Rawalpindi. Again, capital was still in Karachi, but the Ministry of Kashmir Affairs had to be where the army headquarters was. And there's a story, the real story, it's there in Yusuf Sarraf's book, many other books also, that one of the POK presidents went to meet this joint secretary in Ministry of Kashmir Affairs. And the joint secretary said that the phone call I have received a phone call from Karachi, which is the capital. So aap zara sa mere PA ke kamre mein baith jaiye. The joint secretary telling the president of POK to go and sit in his PA's room because there's a call coming from the capital. So this was the status of the high-sounding titles given to the Kashmiris. There's another incident, and again, it's all corroborated. Yusuf Sarraf has also written about it. Sardar Ibrahim, who was dismissed, he wormed his way back into Pakistan's favors. He was brought back to power, and the episode is that Pakistan's Prime Minister, this Sohrawardi, he had come he saw this fellow, Bengali. He had a mixed relationship with Pakistan, and after Pakistan was formed. But anyway, he was made Prime Minister for a short while. So Sohrawardi saw this fellow, Sardar Ibrahim, and told the Chief Secretary of POK, isko gaddi pe bithao. Now, Chief Secretary nominally served under the President of POK. But this showed the power equations that, Chief Secretary बैठाएगा मनसब पे President साहब को किसने कहा है? क्योंकि Prime Minister ने कहा है. Not because, Assembly has elected him, there was no Assembly. Now we come to 1971, this is before the war. And of course, in between, there were other incidents, the Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas was disqualified from participating in elections, sham elections in POK in 64. There were, the basic Democrats system, which was a limited franchises, was Ayub Khan's invention. He did this for entire Pakistan, very limited franchise, less than 1% of people eligible for vote, and experimented it first in POK. Even in that sham election, Sardar Chaudhry Ghulam Abbas was disqualified from participation. K.H. Khurshid, Jinnah's PA, he was, Jinnah was God, so his PA was made the POK president. He was a Kashmiri. He was arrested in 65. So tells you how the people of that region were being treated. 71, and this is a directive given by Ghulam Shah Khan, who was cabinet secretary. Later, he became president of Pakistan, one of the most powerful presidents, who dismissed two prime ministers, Benazir and Nawaz Sharif. Now, in this, you say he gave the directive that every ministry in the field of its responsibility should look upon and deal with Azad Kashmir as if it were another administrative unit of the country. So the fiction was that it was Azad. The reality was that it was being treated as another administrative unit of the country. Now, 71 war changed the political landscape. Shimla Agreement was signed. There was a debate on 14 July 1972. President Bhutto said in Pakistan National Assembly, he was referring to UN Security Council resolutions on Kashmir, and he said the Security Council resolutions don't support Pakistan's position. Now, this is a very significant admission from the man who knew UN very well, and I don't have the time to quote the entire passage there in my book. He was arguing that the Security Council resolution had asked Pakistan to withdraw all its forces while India was asked to withdraw only bulk of its forces. So he said that was the moment, that was the day when you jeopardize the right of self-determination in Jammu and Kashmir. Even in his moment of candor, Mr. Bhutto was twisting the truth. This was his version of truth. And he had many versions. No UN resolutions on Kashmir has mentioned right of self-determination. There's a huge difference between plebiscite and self-determination, which is a bigger concept. It did not exist, or it was very faint at the time plebiscite was decided. If I have time, I'll explain this later. Now, following this, and this was not a one-off statement by Bhutto, he repeated it 15 days later in Karachi, that UN resolutions don't support Pakistan's case. Significance, Pakistan has resurrected UN resolutions after signing Shimla Agreement, saying that the UN Charter and UN resolutions are above any bilateral agreement. Now, even if you concede Pakistan's logic for a moment, Pakistani president's statement showed that they did not have a case. Now we come to 74, POK interim constitution was adopted. The preamble says that this has been authorized to be, this bill, Interim Constitution Act, has been authorized to be introduced in POK Assembly by Pakistan. So again, it tells you of the locus of power, that it didn't come from within the elected assembly. In fact, the assembly was elected a year later. It was an appointed assembly. So the orders came from above. Now, constitutions all over the world, at least in democracies, they define powers of elected assembly and elected government. POJK constitution defines powers of Pakistan within POJK. So this is a complete travesty of truth. Now I'll explain to that, but let me touch on something which you must have, it keeps coming up in debate here on delimitation and so on. Pakistan actually had already changed the demographic composition of the state. But this is legitimized in the POK constitution. What is the definition? There are three parts which are in bold. They borrowed from the definition of state subject, which was a notification issued by Maharaja's government in 27. It was amended once, or probably twice. I don't remember. My book mentions it specifically. Now, this says state subject means a person for the time being residing in Azad Jammu or Kashmir or Pakistan. Of course, when Maharaja issued the notification, there was no Pakistan. But anyway, they have adopted it. Now, for the time being means if you are living in Pakistan and move to POK, fine, you can still be a POK state subject, or the other way around. And you don't even have to move for the time being residing in either Jammu or Kashmir or Pakistan, even if you are residing in Pakistan, that is also fine. You can still be defined as state subject. And then it makes the reference to notification and says as amended from time to time. Now it was amended only once or twice by Maharaja. So who amended it and to what result? Now Pakistan has kept the issue of citizenship, nationality and migration under its direct control. I'll explain to you how. Now, this is the second part, an interesting part of this constitution. Right of self-determination, by definition, is barred under POK constitution. The only option given is accession to Pakistan. It says no person or political parties shall be permitted to propagate against or take part in activities prejudicial or detrimental to the ideology of the state's accession to Pakistan. So state's accession to Pakistan is the only option, or accession to India or independence is not an option. So accession to Pakistan is a predetermined choice. So there is no self-determination. Now, this is the heart of the power compact Pakistan built. Again, I think for the first time, my book has brought this out. Article 31 of POK's interim constitution. What Pakistan did, the constitution created an elected assembly and elected government. But Pakistan created a parallel structure, which was called council, which had some representatives of POK, the president and so on. But it was headed by Pakistani Prime Minister. And the Minister for Kashmir Affairs in Pakistan always had majority, and the Prime Minister had a veto. So this was the real structure where powers were vested. This was called rule by proxy. And you see what the Article 31 says: the council shall have exclusive power to make laws with respect to any matter in the council legislative list set out in the third schedule. So council's powers were defined. The second part says assembly shall and council shall not have powers to make laws with respect to any matter not enumerated in the council legislative list. So the elected assembly's powers were left undefined. And while there is a council legislative list, there is no assembly legislative list. So they created a defunct body. Elected assemblies and elected government have no powers. Now, there's the second part of the same article. It makes a reference to Pakistan's responsibilities under UNCIP. UNCIP, this is UN Commission for India and Pakistan Resolution. Now, the point is, Pakistani representatives have forgotten UNCIP. They don't like to talk about it because it asked Pakistan to withdraw its forces. This was a condition precedent for holding plebiscite. And Pakistan's dilemma was it didn't want to give up what it had illegally grabbed. But here in POK's constitution, because they had no legal authority, they had no de jure authority, so they are hiding behind UNCIP resolution. The government of Pakistan has overarching authority over this entity because of UNCIP resolutions, which had actually asked Pakistan to withdraw from the territory illegally occupied by it. Now, this I have already mentioned, so I'll not go into this. The POK High Court's judgment when I was telling you about northern area. There are two other provisions of the POK interim constitution, which I'll quickly mention. Amendment procedure. It's like UN Charter. Amendment procedure has been made very difficult so that the P5 maintain their hold on Security Council in perpetuity. The same principle has been used by Pakistan. So there's an Article 33 in POK interim constitution, which said that this 3 articles in this constitution cannot be amended by Pakistan POK assembly without Pakistan's approval, which is 31, which I've explained. 33, which is the amendment procedure, and 56. What was 56? That Pakistan, regardless of whatever else is written in this constitution, can dismiss POK government. Now, this was actually used by Zia to dismiss the elected president, and it was used by Nawaz Sharif to dismiss an elected prime minister. Now, High Court judgment I have already mentioned. Now, POK interim constitution of 74, it was criticized because it was essentially ruled by proxy. 40 years later, under 13th Amendment of POK interim constitution in 2018, date is important. This was 1 year before deletion of Article 370 by India. Pakistan brought 13th Amendment of POK interim constitution took place, where council was relegated to advisory role in response to the criticism that this was a real power behind the throne. But its powers were not transferred to elected assembly or elected government. Pakistan has taken them over directly on 32 subjects within POK. And the executive authority flows from the legislative authority. So that means that Pakistan has scrounged up, POK never had Azadi, it has scrounged up autonomy also from within. And on the remaining 22 subjects also, it says that no change, no legislation is possible without Pakistan's approval. And this is, I'm giving you the exact wording. Government of Pakistan shall have exclusive powers to make laws with respect to any matter enumerated in Part A of the third schedule. There are no reference to council legislative list. They have said Part A of third schedule. And government of Pakistan. So now Pakistan, which pretends or claims that POK or POJK is Azad, has built in its authority within the POK constitution. Now, Gilgit-Baltistan. Now, Gilgit-Baltistan, I was explaining in the beginning, and let me go back a little. It's a very important historical context, which may be useful, interesting, especially for members of the armed forces. January 49, a truce agreement was signed between India and Pakistan. Now, my book has brought out for the first time something which has been missed, that Pakistan expanded into northern area after the ceasefire went into effect. And I have brought this out not on the basis of media reports or any Indian source, but UN reports. Now, the UN reports mention that immediately after the UNCIP resolution of August 48, Nehru had suggested that, India should station garrisons in the northern area. And northern area, basically, there were very few forces. The fighting took place lower down near the, Jammu area, because Pakistan didn't have the logistic forces. And Major Brown has written in his book that, Pakistan was very weak. He said he had a meeting with Liaquat Ali Khan, and he explained to him that you have no forces, please build them up. So this was essentially a very little force. India had stopped its military advance for whatever reasons. I don't want to go into it. But Nehru suggested we have military garrisons. UN did not dispute India's claim. UN said yes, but we will come to it later when the truce agreements have been worked out. Now the next report says, and there is UN report saying till December 1948, Pakistan did not have effective control of this area. The same report quotes a formal written communication from Pakistan which said Pakistan had only one officer. Then 20 paras down the line, the report says that, however, on 1st January 1949, Pakistan had achieved effective control. So if on 31st December 48, Pakistan did not have effective control, and Pakistan government said it had only one officer, then how come on 1st January 49, the next day, it was in effective control of such a large area? Now, actually, I don't have time to go through it, but you can read in chapter 3 of my book on UN aspects. As late as May, judging by Pakistan's reply, they were not sure. They didn't have forces because, India again repeated this, that, we want to station garrison, and then Pakistan asked, very clear, they didn't dispute. They didn't say we have forces. But, they wanted to know where India was going to send the garrisons and so on. So it was only later when, the truce agreement went into effect, which allowed Pakistan to divert its forces from this Jammu area and sent them to this vast area which has been occupied by them. And this is a very major game they made, because without Pakistan's illegal control of northern areas, which they have re-Christianed Gilgit-Baltistan, there would have been no CPEC. They would not have had any contiguity with China. And if he had not lost control over this area, India would have had a geographical contiguity with Afghanistan through Wakhan corridor. And this change came about. It was not before the fighting, it was after the ceasefire agreement had gone into effect. Now, Gilgit-Baltistan or northern area was essentially a gift of the British to Pakistan for strategic reasons. They were thinking that, there was some romantics and probably in British Foreign Office who were still thinking of the great game. Britain didn't have the power, but they wanted, that option. So now, because of the strategic location, this was kept under Pakistan's direct control from the beginning, with no representative institutions. There's a famous case of 99, when people of Gilgit-Baltistan, which was still called Northern Area, they went to Pakistan Supreme Court, and Pakistan Supreme Court issued a judgment in which Pakistan Supreme Court asked Pakistan government to establish, to ensure judicially enforceable fundamental rights. Implication, till then there were no judicially enforceable fundamental rights in Northern Area or Gilgit-Baltistan. I'm talking of 99. The second sentence of the same judgment says, and provide representative institutions within a period of 6 months or 6 weeks, 6 months probably. My book has the exact detail. Which the implication that there were no representative institutions. Now, you look at the timeline. This is May 1999. What is the significance? This was the time when Pakistan had intruded in Kargil, and the stated position that they were trying to liberate Kashmir, but the area they had illegally occupied, there were no representative institutions and there were no fundamental rights. Now, it took Pakistan government about 10 years to act, and when it acted, and that came in 2009, this was more of an accident or personalities. Zardari became president. He was a Shia. Gilgit-Baltistan is the only Shia majority region under Pakistan's control, so he gave them some semblance of, some limited autonomy on 61 subjects. Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2009. This was scrapped under Gilgit-Baltistan Order of 2018, which was just after Nawaz Sharif government had been derailed by army and Imran Khan was about to be elected. Shah Haqqan Abbasi was the interim prime minister. Gilgit-Baltistan Order abolished the entire list of 61 subjects on which limited powers had been given by the previous order of 2009, and marked the nomenclature as order. It's not constitution. It's an order from Islamabad. Even the constitution was, it was simply a pretext, but at least they were observing some figment of, respectability. This is direct, order. Now, this was a very major, step or setback. So there were protests, and this line which I am quoting, the copies of said order were torn in Gilgit-Baltistan Provincial Assembly during the address of the Prime Minister of Pakistan. Now, where has this come from? I have not quoted, from media reports. I have used primary sources, which Pakistan can't dispute. This is an excerpt from the POK, from Gilgit-Baltistan Supreme Judicial Court's decision, because the people of that area and the Legislative Assembly, whatever it was, they didn't have any power, so they went to the court, the Supreme Judicial Court of the territory. And the court, this is reminiscent of that historic judgment of POK High Court in 93, gave a slap to Pakistan and scrapped this order. Pakistan government went in appeal to Pakistan Supreme Court, and Pakistan Supreme Court sided with Islamabad against the people of the territory and restored that order against which they were protesting. So this tells you the reality of what is there in POJK and Gilgit-Baltistan, and it's there not by accident, but it's built into the constitution, so-called constitution or orders. There's another interesting point. There's always, the criticism that Indian central institutions have, extended their jurisdiction over J&K and eroded the state's autonomy. POK and Gilgit-Baltistan do not form part of Pakistan's territory under Article 1 of Pakistan's constitution, because Pakistan, being a good boy, they want to observe international law, so they are waiting for plebiscite under UN resolutions. Now, the question is, it's a very important legal question. If these territories are not part of Pakistan, how can Pakistan's Supreme Court issue orders? And they have issued at least two major orders, 99 and 2019. The second one was restoring the Gilgit-Baltistan order. What they did, which was, a complete, twist, or whatever you call it. That's twist is a mild word. They said that human rights are universal. So even if it's not part of our territory, we are duty bound to observe human rights. And using that, they passed the order. 99 order at least was good enough to talk about human rights and ask for judicially enforceable human rights to be given. 2019 order is completely silent. So it talks about it in the preamble, but the operative part only is about restoring Islamabad's right. Now, sorry. Okay. This I'll come back. Now, this is a very important part. The chief resource of this area is water. Now, Mangla Dam was constructed in 67. One consequence was the displacement of people, the so-called Mirpuris, who are not really Kashmiris. They are all now in London. Now, the last thing, and the demographic change took place. The economic consequences are that POK gets 15 paisa per unit for the same molecule of water, for which Pakistan's provinces, Punjab and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, get 1 rupee 10 paisa, 7 times more. Why the discrimination? Pakistan's justification is that, POK is given what is called water usage charge. Pakistan's provinces are given what is called hydropower royalty. Now, there is difference in nomenclature, but it didn't matter if the amount was the same. And the argument is that under Article 161 of Pakistan's constitution, this can only be given to Pakistan's provinces, but these are not our provinces. Now, the funny part is that Pakistan's constitution, the current one, came into being in 1973, 6 years after Mangla Dam was constructed. So they had enough time to ponder over it and make some provision. If there was an omission, there have been 26 amendments of Pakistan's constitution since then. Everything else has been changed except this. So this is not inadvertent. And third, even if you concede Pakistan's point of view that this doesn't form part of their territory under international law, if you buy something from some other country, you pay for it. So this argument didn't come into the way when it was a question of appropriating the natural resources. It was raised only when it came to paying for it. Now, election, which again is something which comes up here, and let me tell you how it works that side. Elections have no meaning where the elected assembly or government have no powers. That is the first thing. Second, the elections in POK and Gilgit-Baltistan always bring to power the party which is in power in Islamabad. Now, this happy coincidence is engineered because at least 20 out of 53 seats in POK assembly are, not elected. 8 are reserved and 12 are distributed all over Pakistan. So you have this strange result that MQM, which is a party of Mahajis settled in Karachi, had won 2 seats in POK assembly in, I think, 2018 elections. Recently, after Imran Khan's government was, eased out, there was a change, which is a normal procedure, but it was done very, with a lot of finesse. So the party was not changed. There was a vote of confidence. And the chief minister, a prime minister was changed. Sardar Ilyas Khan was, he replaced the earlier chap called Niazi. Now, what's wrong with it? It's part of the democracy. The funny part was the vote of confidence against the sitting prime minister, who was elected by a heavy margin of 33 votes in an assembly of 53 just a year ago. The vote of confidence was sponsored, or no confidence was sponsored, not by the opposition. It was brought by the ruling party. And the opposition boycotted it because it was a whole thing was a farce. Now, let me just touch upon, and of course, the last thing which is very relevant, and if you compare the situation on two sides, the complete demise of regional parties. And on our side, democracy has given a voice to people of Jammu and Kashmir. In their side, out of 53 seats in last election, only one seat was won by Muslim Conference party, and it's all the national parties, PTI and PMLN and DPP. Now there's the last part, and this is a very interesting commentary on UK's position, which was a very enthusiastic supporter of plebiscite. Now this is what UK said in their statement on, I have quoted their statement of 57, they had made similar statement as early as 1948. The question of circumstances, Cyprus was a colony, and Cyprus wanted to be independent. High Commissioner Mr. Parsati served as High Commissioner there later. UK opposed it, and it opposed it on the ground that this was part of UK's territory. It was internal affair of UK. Question of circumstances in which the principle of self-determination could be applied in any of the territories of a member state was clearly an internal matter for that state. Now, there is a saying, and any infringement by the United Nations of that fundamental principle would be regarded by United Kingdom government as ultra-vires and completely unacceptable. Isn't there a two-tongue theory coming from our British masters? Now, they have my last concluding thing. I'll not take more time. There's a huge difference between plebiscite and self-determination. The concept of self-determination has a very faint echo in UN Charter. It's not an accident because the framers of the Charter, at least the two, UK and France, were major colonial powers, and they were not in a hurry to liquidate their colonial possessions. Kashmir issue was taken to UN Security Council in 48. The same year, Universal Declaration of Human Rights was adopted. This is a fundamental document of modern concept of human rights. Universal Declaration of Human Rights does not mention right of self-determination. Now there is 48. Since then, this right has expanded in scope. Now let me hurry back to the new millennia. EU has adopted a human rights charter. And that human rights charter of the EU does not mention right of self-determination. Thank you. There have been two referendum, Mosul and the other one was in Spain, and Catalonia. And Catalonia referendum results were opposed by the European Commission and EU governments. And Mosul referendum, this was called, was opposed by Turkey, Arab states, and Iran, despite the huge political differences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's really enlightening for us. It's really a great challenge to present what you have written in this book in 45 minutes or 1 hour. And you have tried to do justice, covering up most the main points which you have written in the book. I've gone through this book, and I think this book is, I would recommend for all the students of not only the international relations or security studies, but also those who are keenly watching or following or observing Pakistan. We hardly get to know about what is exactly happening in the other side. All we get to know about the security and strategy, but how the people have been. This has been a simmering tensions in the Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and there are a lot of issues and tensions, and you have nicely brought out and in a very scholarly fashion, and it's a really interesting fact. This and one interesting insights that which comes to my mind after reading your book. The question is that why the JNK Reorganization Act happened in 2019, August 5, despite the electoral victory of the BJP government within 3 months, and there is no question of or no thoughts about to gain some sort of electoral score. That was a prevalent question at that time. But after reading your book, I got an insight. There has been developments which is happening the other side, like you mentioned about the 2018 amendment, and that you trace back to the 1948 and 1947 when they formed this provisional government and usurped all the rights and political rights and continuing happening human rights. In that respect, I think it's really interesting. Thanks. I think people must be having a lot of questions. And before that, I request the Honorable Chancellor for his remarks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much to the speaker. We've had this certain deliberation and why we thought this was worthwhile. There are two sides to the arguments which are now flickering around, and frankly, that is really our need for dealing with the issue of Jammu and Kashmir internationally. And what has been said before, just before me, makes it very clear what were the conditions under international law that we operated, and how that the arguments put forward by Pakistan on various issues, self-determination and so on, has never been cleared by the UN Security Council. So I think there are a lot of arguments where I find going around the media, going around various places, that the Pakistanis keep saying this. Arey bhai, unko suna kisne? It has been time and again rejected in the UN Security Council and even in the General Assembly, where the Israeli comes up for discussion. And we wanted to clear this air. And the book which has been written, those of you who go into, especially for those studying international relations, please read the book carefully, because it gives you an idea. And I've done this primarily after discussions with the Vice Chancellor on seeing that on Jammu and Kashmir, at least people in the University of Jammu are aware of the facts behind partition and the whole issue of Jammu and Kashmir. I have a more interesting sort of approach to it, because it was quite interesting when I joined the foreign service. I moved on, and suddenly, when I was in America, I was asked to Washington. I said I got a posting order saying you are hereby transferred as Consul General of India in Karachi. The consulate had just been set up. My predecessor, you would have heard of, was Manishankar Iyer, who's I think around the time that you were there, and that he's moved on to politics. But an interesting feature one needs to bear in mind is when I got that order of posting to Jammu to Kashmir from Washington to Karachi. One of the Pakistani things was, have you ever visited Pakistan? Because the only time I crossed it earlier, we got the brigadier here, was during the 1965 conflict across the Samba border. So I couldn't say that on a visa application for Consul General, but nevertheless, that was the reality, and that's I have looked. And for people in Jammu, would like to know, one of the crossings we made in '65 was from Jammu, and it brings back. And therefore, being back in Jammu has an interesting facet of life for me. It's central to what we deal with. Coming to the more modern problems, when I went to Karachi, there's something you should understand. You know, especially when you deal with people in parts other than the military side of Punjab, they're all people like you and me. And I think a very interesting decision Mr. Vajpayee took. Everybody said, "Kinko roko." Vajpayee said, "No kholo." And you won't believe it, the number of visas we issued and the crowds we had about the outside, the consulate was immense. Because people in Karachi were people who had migrated from India during partition. And they were disillusioned with the country they were living in. Firstly, the Sindhi did not welcome them. There are millions of them who went across, and they're still called Muhajirs. Second generation, a Muhajir is a refugee. And that sort of has been a fascinating experience for me. The tenure I started was when I said Mr. Vajpayee gave these instructions. What I want to say was, we were very clear. I mean, where I lived, the opposite residence was Benazir Bhutto's, who was under detention by Ziaullah. Karachi was very fascinating for that way, and it is really the heart of Pakistan. The Urdu language was taken from India. Urdu was never a language of Pakistan. It was taken from the northern Indian states, where it was widely spoken, and otherwise the Sindhis ruled, the Punjabis ruled, and the Baloch ruled, and the Pashtuns. It came in, but it was because the leaders who formed it went and gave Urdu the primary place. And that has been interesting because it has led to certain forms of nationalism. But coming more closely, I think everyone knows about the partition. The reading has been done. But you must bear a number of things in mind. One side of Pakistan, of Jammu and Kashmir, went Pakistan because the ceasefire was declared. And it's quite interesting that the people who was sort of left on the other side were not a single Kashmiri. Very few on the other side. That was an area where largely the population up north towards Punjab was Punjabi speaking. That's the reality. Then you have when you go towards the right, this continued, and Kashmiri is spoken in very little amount. The language still largely is Punjabi, and in the tribal areas they have had their own language, whether it's Pakistan or elsewhere. So, in understanding what you are dealing with when dealing with Pakistan and Kashmir, bear one thing in mind. There are severe differences with the Shia areas in Pakistan, and then with the others. The other point is that again the issue comes in as to what are we all about, and the differences have grown vastly. They increased more with the creation of Bangladesh, because Bangladesh, it was not just a military victory; it was victory for a simple fact, that it proved that religion alone cannot be the basis of nationhood. The Bengali lives happily in India. If you add we has fiery chief ministers who are pretty strong, even in Delhi. The same is not the case in Pakistan. You do have this factor you have to bear in mind. Now, coming to dealing with Pakistan. Yes, UN resolutions were passed, but they were rendered unimplementable, as the previous speaker has said. And then we moved on to new agreement, Simla. And therefore, any talk now is on this is that the UN resolutions were unimplementable, and you have to go by the Simla agreement. And the Simla agreement, you say all issues and differences will be settled by bilateral negotiations. That is the crux of our position. That is the position which is accepted internationally. However much people may scream about what was said in 1949. Thereafter, it was Pakistan which stalled and rendered it unimplementable. And with 71, Pakistan, as it existed there, no longer did. It lost half the country. So right now, I think internationally, we don't worry about Jammu and Kashmir. I mean, India goes around today, even in the neighborhood. Afghanistan's wheat comes from India. Can you beat it? तालिबान को 15-20 साल के लिए हथियार देते रहे, लेकिन वहां बना कुछ नहीं. There's no agriculture, nothing. If you go to Afghanistan, you will find similarly. India's projects were all development oriented and people oriented. We have declined from getting militarily involved very wisely in Afghanistan. Nobody who's got militarily involved in Afghanistan has come back happy. And right now, what we are into an extremely interesting situation where there are two varieties of Taliban. The Taliban from Afghanistan and those who trained in the tribal areas of Pakistan. Pakistani Taliban, they're all Pashtun. And the fact of the matter is that it is these people, the Taliban, from both in Pakistan, who had been armed first to fight the Russians and then the Americans, are now turning against the Afghan government. The pleas being made by Pakistan and the threats being held out by Pakistan to the Taliban are not funny. They are serious, but karoge kya? Pashtuns are in your army also. You cannot be massacring Pashtuns. And therefore, what we should be grateful, I think, to is to the fact that we as a people, so diverse, 17 languages, all sorts of diversity, we've yet learned to live together. And that is if someone asks me what is the problem with Pakistan, they can't. You talk to the Americans, they haven't forgotten that it was Taliban armed by the ISI which threw them out. The Russians say the same thing. And right now they are going around supplying weapons to Ukraine. This is the latest thing. They got so worried when Americans got angry that they said, "Nahi, hathiyar de denge ki Ukraine." Rus naraz ho gaya hai. The Russians are angry. So I think one propensity of Pakistan is they're wanting to compete with everybody, with India on everything. Now, and what has sort of caught the world imagination is they managed it so badly. They say, "Kidhar bhi jao, fauja hi fauja hai, mauja hi mauja hai." This sort of thing. The problem there is really serious. And more seriously, people now are asking, what is this Fauj here for? It is ruled by a small elite. They have fought the Balochis, and now they're fighting the Tehreek-e-Taliban, which comes from the Baloch hinterland up north. And the army is deeply involved. So we are into a situation in dealing with Pakistan where we go back to the original cause of Jammu and Kashmir. I left a booklet, I think, here, which we did when we made, after Kargil, we made certain proposals to Pakistan. And that was spelled out very clearly by Dr. Manmohan Singh when he spoke in Amritsar. And his solution was simple. Borders cannot be changed, but they can be made movable and open. But they cannot be changed. The aim was really to tell the Pakistanis that look, you haven't reached anywhere. You have not reached any settlement. And what we can do is this, that the line of control becomes a line of cooperation. Of course, there will be regulations on movement and so on. But the feeling we get now is they're too scared to allow their side of Kashmiris to come this side. And especially in a controlled manner. And this proposal, I must say one more thing. In credit to our political leadership, when it has come to Pakistan, there has been no question of disowning anything done by a prior government. BJP was in power, they did not disown Simla Agreement. And right now, the BJP in power is happily following up on Professor Manmohan Singh's, Dr. Manmohan Singh's advice delivered in Amritsar. So if you find the booklet from which I'm leaving here, you will find what he said precisely. And that the fact of the matter is we've now reached this situation where Pakistan now has to answer. There have been also questions about, the people of Pakistan occupied Kashmir and, their similarities. They have no similarity. They're being Kashmiris. By they are all largely drawn from Punjab. And there is no question that of calling them Kashmiris. So the whole of this idea is structured. And on Gilgit-Baltistan, I must tell you one thing. I was in Pakistan during Kargil, when suddenly our guys on wireless transmitters found a lot of things being exchanged in Balti. The Northern Light inventory was made, or more or less, Bali ke Bakre, but being put up on in the hilltops of Kargil. And I recall speaking then to General Malik when I was in Delhi. I just asked the chief, what's going to happen? He says, you relax, we'll clear this up. And it was extremely interesting. And this is a certain pride. We did not cast aspersions on the abilities of the Pakistan military or anything. The action spoke for itself. I think what I'm saying is, dealing with Pakistan is not scoring debating points. As I said, when I go back to what we had said about Karachi, when we opened out visas for Karachi for people who had relatives in India, and there were a couple of million of them, Karachi mein mahal badal gaya. It was really incredible that when they came back, I remember people telling me कि हम समझते नहीं कि हम वतन छोड़ के और कहीं गए. There is a certain impact, therefore, And what has been the impact of all this uh, that we have in dealing with Pakistan today? It is that the Congress and the BJP may be fighting each other. Everybody must be saying, "I'm better than you." But when it comes down to national interests, we have held stably. So, as I would like to say that what you heard first was don't listen to television arguments saying कि Pakistan has got this diplomatic victory, अब इनको ये दे दो, वो दे दो, nothing. We are the government and the successive governments function in a coordinated manner. Look at one little thing, Mr. Modi traveling from a visit to Afghanistan, not coming home, going to Lahore to attend the wedding of Nawaz Sharif's daughter. And Jawab, which the army was, by that time, I think the army was getting nervous. And then came Balakot. And you've given a befitting reply which needed to be given, but you don't talk about it. That increases your bargaining power in the world. But my view still is that keep the darwaza open. If they want to come, aane do. I'm in a minority, I must say this. But genuine people, I'll tell you what really happens, and I've enjoyed seeing it through Karachi and through Islamabad. Businessman aata hai visa ke liye. I asked him, Dubai ke liye visa hai? He said, हाँ. Very clear in my mind. He is going to set up his business contacts with the Indians in Dubai. So you have to learn to play this game in a sophisticated manner. Avoid getting communally influenced. And I noticed that I'm very happy that the DG of Jammu and Kashmir endorses what I said. But these are the things that today I was particularly happy to bring in this book to you. Because this book, which I hope I request that you get enough copies for, is must reading. Because it reveals that all this talk is about India violating UN resolutions. No. You did not fulfill the contents, how does it exist? So we should not, I would like to emphasize, having done 2 tenures in Karachi and Islamabad as Consul General and as High Commissioner, I can say be tough on matters of national security. No, right. The interesting part is always on defense. Keep an edge. Don't go back to a 65 situation when you have to fight as equals. That'll be, but successive governments, successive army service chiefs have ensured that that edge is maintained. You don't have to go to war. You shouldn't talk about war. As I said, when you look at the situation, what was the need for them to use armed force against Baloch who are fighting in the north? No problem. The army is a law unto itself. You have the same problem now with regard to the section of the Taliban. अरे भाई, आपने तालिबान का इस्तेमाल किया, अमेरिकनों को परेशान किया, रूसियों ने परेशान किया. So what have they gained? And very frankly, we need to bear this in mind. And to the purpose of this, of having my colleague to deliver what he has said, because this is the first book which has come out, which establishes the legal and real background to the problems of Jammu and Kashmir. And I felt that as Chancellor, I would be only fair for me to invite him And to give you an idea over the head, that what he said is conscious policy followed by successive governments. I would like to stress that no state has Mr. Modi ever questioned the initiative that Dr. Manmohan Singh took after the Kargil conflict. And let's all hope we can keep that unity going when we deal with difficult neighbors, whether on the east or on our west. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And I think due to paucity of time, we will take a few questions, 1 or 2, 3 questions, then we'll go for, we'll wind up the event. Now the floor is open. No more comments, only questions, pointed questions. If anyone have any questions. Please identify yourself. Yeah.
Hi, sir. Good evening. Namaskar, sir. Good evening. Thank you so much for coming to Jammu and presenting some thoughts and some details of the book. And as sir said, just questions only. But before that question, just a simple and humble observation. I mean, except Muzaffarabad and Neelam Valley, the rest of the 80% other than Gilgit and Baltistan belongs to the Jammu region. So I trust this is mentioned already in the book. And you mentioned about Mirpur. I again trust, hopefully their struggle, and as most of them are settled now in the UK, and some of them are there in colony called Bakshinagar in Jammu only. So I hope this book talks about that struggle also. Sir, my only simple question is, this narrative is, are eminent people in sitting in Delhi or elsewhere in the country. They are almost, playing in the same narratives which were set in 1947-48. For example, Kashmir, line of control, POK. Why not POJK every time? Even I have seen a lot of ministers and eminent people use this word POK. Why not POJK? First question. Second question, regarding the same question. I mean, this narrative actually has been set by, I would say, anti-Indian forces who just want to take this thing. Why not to break this narrative while even in Jammu also? This is some simple observation and a small question, sir. And as Partha said, sir, said that those people are welcome. We should open our borders and welcome them. I believe, as a native of Jammu and Kashmir, I think, sir, we have our own set of problems. I think the timing is not right. Just a comment, sir. Just a comment. Thank you.
Okay, any more questions? Yeah.
Good evening, sir. I'm Neena Gupta in the Department of English, and it was wonderful listening to you today. Sir, if I may sort of ask you how you have, you said you have sourced the material from UN, but a little bit about your methodology, because, we in Jammu Kashmir, we've been trying to correct this narrative for a very long time. And I have also been in touch with a lot of people who are worried about the Jammu heritage part of, this problem. But we can never, apart from the military histories, which are somehow always debated by the West. So could you sort of suggest certain methodologies or certain sources that one could look up when we are researching this history?
Yeah, the last question. Somebody has raised their hand. Yeah, please.
Hello, sir. I'm Mridul. I'm from the Department of English. My question is to Mr. Srivastav. So my question is very, precise. So, what is your opinion on the, the discontent and the position that senior journalist Devadas takes on the Kashmir issue, and secondly, about the failure of the Nehru guest talk policy? So, So the guest house policy of Nehru, in which delegates from Pakistan were called in to discuss the Kashmir issue and the failures of it. So that is my question.
Okay, thank you. Over to you, sir.
Well, I can understand you said first it was really a comment, not a question. And I have already conceded that, you saw the slide, you used the term UJK, but the issues are much more serious than simply a question of nomenclature. While I understand your sentiments, we should not limit it only to a question of terminology and go into what has been done to people who were part of Jammu region only, as you pointed out. The second observation, this question was about the sources and methodology. And I'm grateful to you that you brought it up, because when I chose this methodology that has used Pakistani and UN sources, basically to avoid any doubt that they will, of course, question my interpretation, but they can't question the facts. But this became very difficult. It was a very difficult task I set for myself, because there's complete lack of transparency. So, but I have quoted those documents, which are, not just primary sources. This is memoirs of major actors who actually shaped the events on the ground, as well as the government documents, that is Pakistan High Court, UK High Court judgment, Pakistan Supreme Court judgment, orders, constitutional amendments, and so on. The third one was about Nehru's guest house policy. Frankly, I'm not aware of the incident, so I will not be able to comment on it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Now I request the Honorable Chancellor to present a memento to Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava.
When I was in Russia, after a lively speech, there's sudden silence. And the Russians will look up and say, for that silence, it means another KGB man has been born. Which means that another intelligence guy has been born.
Now may I request Professor Devanand Sir, Central University of Jammu, to present the Honorable Chancellor with a memento. Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Yashwant Sir, Registrar, Central University of Jammu, for the formal vote of thanks.
Very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to our Honorable Chancellor Sir, Ambassador G. Parthasarathy, for his gracious presence and the organized distinguished lecture series, The Forgotten Kashmir, Other Side of the Line of Control. Sir, your guidance and support for our university has been invaluable. We thank you, sir, for your unwavering commitment to this ideal of education and for your constant support and encouragement. We look forward to continue to work under your guidance to make our university an even greater success in the future. On behalf of the Central University of Jammu, I would like to express our sincere thanks to Ambassador Dinkar P. Srivastava for his enlightening and thought-provoking lecture on his book, Forgotten Kashmir, The Other Side of the Line of Control. Your lecture has provided us with a unique insight into the complex issue surrounding the Kashmir conflict, and your personal anecdote have helped to humanize the situation for us. Your passion and dedication to shedding light on the plight of the people of Kashmir have truly inspired us. Your detailed analysis of the historical background and the current situation in the region has provided us with a deeper understanding of the conflict. Once again, thank you for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. Your presentation has made a lasting impact on all of us, and we hope that your message will continue to inspire others to work toward peace and justice in Kashmir. I would like to thank Professor Sanjeev Jain, in absence here, Honorable Vice Chancellor of CUG, who gave continuous support and encouragement to organize such event. Also, I would like to thank Professor Devanand Sir, Dean School of Basic and Applied Sciences, Shri Ashok Van, retired DGP J&K, members of the Armed Forces, members of the Police Academy, deans of the various schools, head of the department of various departments, faculty members, staff members, research scholars, students, for gracing this occasion and be a part of this lecture. At last, I would like to congratulate Department of National Security Studies, especially Dr. Jagan, for organizing this distinguished lecture. Thank you. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Now I request everybody to stand up and join us for the national anthem.
जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उज्जल जलधि तरंगा तव शुभ नामे जागे तव शुभ आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे भारत माता की जय.
Now I request everybody to join us for the tea.